The Prophet.
Welcome back to the Nafeesa Dango Show. If you've just joined us, a very warm welcome. We're having some really interesting topics this afternoon. So, of course, make yourself comfortable and get enticed into, of course, being educated on how to deal with different relative aspects of your life and how to overcome them and make it better. I'm speaking this afternoon to Parini Shah. She's 22 years old and has lived her life between three countries. She was born in America, raised in Tokyo, and a Bombay girl at heart. She's a law student who is passionate about reading, writing, and storytelling, which is why she began her latest venture in content creation on Instagram, where she does 30-second book reviews. Parini Shah speaks to us this afternoon about her relocating and what it's caused her to suffer from identity confusion and the impacts of it on her daily life. And I think that's very apt. A lot of the times, many people find themselves due to their workspaces and jobs where even though you're young, maybe your parents are having to relocate every now and then and not realizing the impacts that it has. So she's going to be giving us some insight into that this afternoon. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on the Nafeesa Dango Show. Parini, can you unmute your phone because I can't hear you? Let's see if we can get some sound up. No, we're just trying to reconnect with Parini Shah there. And as I was talking about, a lot of the times we find that our parents or ourselves, due to workspaces or certain situations in our lives, having to relocate from one country or one town to the other, and not realizing that it has impacts on our daily lives, and we eventually start suffering. Hello, there we go.
Hi,
Parini
can you
Shah.
hear me? Can you hear
I
me?
can.
Okay,
Yes,
awesome.
I can. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. A warm welcome. We're so excited to have you on the show this afternoon.
Thank
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's actually evening in Tokyo. I'm in Tokyo with my parents because of the pandemic. So yeah, how are you? How's everything going there?
Well, I suppose we're taking it a day at a time. It's sunny out here in South Africa today. It's mid-afternoon. And we're glad you're joining us. And I should say a very good evening to you.
Yes.
All the way from Tokyo. We're so privileged to have you on our show this afternoon. Talk to us a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
I found your story very interesting. And I think, as I was saying earlier, a lot of the times people don't realize that, certain things that they do in their lives actually has some form of impact or the other on them, on their daily lives and going forward, of course. And of course, psychologically, mentally, physically, people just take some of the things that they do for granted. And this is what COVID-19 has taught us is, get up and reflect and see what's happening around you.
Of course. So I'm going to start with a little story about how this acknowledgement of my identity crisis, as to say, came about. So before I wanted to start my content creation journey on Instagram, I knew that it would involve me talking to the camera and, I would have to speak. And I was paralyzed by this question, which accent should I speak in? And typically not a lot of people would deal with something like this because either they've lived in one place their entire life or they've spoken in a certain way their entire life. My upbringing was largely different. My parents moved, I think 32 years ago to Japan from India. They are immigrant. My parents are immigrant families in Tokyo. And they enrolled me and my brother in an international school here. And I was privileged enough to receive an education that was very superior compared to, the rest of the world. And I learned how to talk in English like this. I learned how to speak like an American, courtesy of my teachers, who are all Americans. And that was the world I knew. And it was ironic because in a room full of kids, they looked nothing like me. There were people from Africa, from Asia, from every part of the world, and we all sounded the same. So, except for the color of our skin, we were just the same people until in 7th grade, I think I had to move back to India. And I've never lived in India. I've only gone to India for vacations up till then. And this is like, okay, you're going to be living in India, going to an Indian school. And I remember the first time, like a seventh grader walks into the room, and I think it's going to be great, it's going to be people that are like me. We're all Indians, we're all Indians. We're going to get along fine. And the teacher asks me to introduce myself, and I introduce myself saying, "Hi, I'm Parini Shah." And I wasn't even done with the first sentence, and everyone's mouths were like gaping wide. They were like, why does she sound like this? And then it struck me. I mean, people in India don't talk like this. There's an entirely different accent, the socially accepted accent, to talk in. And the first week of school was hell. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, people would look at me, either they thought I was putting on an accent, or they thought I had an attitude, or God knows whatever conjectures they were coming up with. And when you're like, today we see that, oh, you go to a new country, you don't change your accent, you stay true to who you are, you stay your authentic self and all of that. But I was a seventh grader. I just wanted to make friends, and I wanted to have sleepovers with girls and just fit in, and
Mm.
I found myself changing my accent to a way that I sounded like my classmates, right? But the problem was that it wasn't like I moved to India and that India's my life. The problem was my
Yes.
parents and my brother continue to stay back in Japan. I continue to have a life in Japan, and I continue to have a life in India. So every time I spoke to my brother, I sounded like an American. Every time I spoke to my friends in India, I sounded like an Indian. If I spoke to my friends in Japan, or even my parents, or even people in America, I sounded like this. And it was fine, switching between accents. It's so easy for me. Like, I could do it in my sleep, and people are so shocked. Like, how can you do this? Right? And
I find
it's
that
fine.
so I find that so difficult for you, because the thing is, it's having to switch every time you're talking to somebody, is having to actually switch that accent, when in actual fact, the way I see it is, you just need to be your natural old self, because you're such a wonderful person. So I think that accent really shouldn't matter. And I think this is where
I agree.
I think many people don't actually understand that. I mean, it's a simple thing. I mean, you grew up in Tokyo, and that's just what it is. And you came to India, and there's a purpose you came for, and that's how it should be. But that is not the norm in many instances.
I agree. But the thing is, okay, you talk about your natural self, right? The problem is, I don't know what my natural voice sounds like. It's because I either sound like this, or I sound like someone from India who's talking to you like this, and my name is Parini. Like this, both are very integral parts of me, is what I'm trying to say. There I don't have a halfway point between these two accents. They're both equally me, they're both equally real. And if I had to choose between them, it's like I just do it. I choose based on the person opposite me, I choose, if I'm in India, I want to make the person comfortable. If I can speak like them, why wouldn't I speak like them? It's not like I'm faking it, because I have, lived there for so many years. And then when I go back to the US, it's hard for, I think we all, as human beings, psychologically, we're social animals. We want to be connected. We want to feel like we belong. And sometimes subconsciously, you'll notice when you're talking to someone from a different accent, from a different region, halfway through the conversation, either you or either them will try to meet you halfway, and you'll see like a merge in the way you talk. So I think it's just, they're very two separate parts, but it is what it is.
How difficult has it been for you? I mean, it's not easy having to, should we say, you have this identity confusion, because, as you say, your parents originally from India, and then
Yes.
you grew up in Tokyo. And I mean, that had been the norm for you for a very long time. And then
Yeah.
having to go back to India, to your grassroots of your parents, is very difficult. I'm sure it has been very challenging for you, being in that space.
At first it was, I won't lie. It was a shock, right? It was ironic, because you think that an Indian would fit in best in India, but for all intents and purposes, I wasn't Indian. I'd grown up as any other child had in Tokyo. I didn't, other than the things that my parents taught me, there was no part of me that was acclimated to Indian culture. But and people think it's so funny when I say this. In my 22, or now 23 soon, in the 23 years that I've lived on this earth, I have spent the least amount of years in Bombay, in India. And yet, when someone asks me which place I think of when I think of home, it's Bombay for me. And I don't think time is a measure. I don't think time is a measure. I don't think how long you spent in a certain place is a measure of what it takes for that place to become home. It was hard at first, but I think I just made incredible friends. I found really comfort in my surroundings.
Mhm.
I participated, I thrived in that environment, and I was a new me. Even though my accent changed, I found like I was able to tap into parts of myself that weren't there before. I became a more confident person. I became a more outspoken person that I was in Tokyo. And so, there are very distinct parts of me, and India is home at the end of it, at the end of the day. I guess the difficulty that comes with this switching back and forth only happens when my worlds collide. For example, I had a friend in America who came to visit me in India. And of course, like, I want to take him around, I want to show him to all these places. And it's fine until it's just the two of us, because we talk like, we've always known each other. I talk in my American accent, he talks, that's his normal accent. But then the problem is when I'm introducing him to my friends in India,
Right.
it's that room, and suddenly I remember the anxiety. I literally texted my best friend saying, because very few people knew about this switching back and forth. I was like, what do I talk like? Because Smeeth, my friend who was there, he has known me as one Parini person who talks like this his entire life. He doesn't know any other Parini. But at the same time, my friends in India, who I'm introducing him to, they also know one version of me, which is the Parini they've known in Bombay their entire lives. How do I reconcile it? Who do I decide to shock? And I don't want to go into like a lengthy explanation of why I have two accents. It's not fun in like a party. So I decided to keep silent most of that night. I remember like I wouldn't talk.
Ouch.
I know it's like weird, but I wouldn't talk. I would
I
talk to
think
him
that's very
separately.
difficult because
It
the thing
was.
is, you're not allowed to be yourself. And
I know.
talking about that, what about the lifestyle? Because I mean, of course, the lifestyle in Bombay is way different to the lifestyle in Tokyo, and I'm sure that it created a lot of issues as far as your identity confusion is
Yeah.
concerned. Because you ask yourself, I've been living well most of my life that particular way in Tokyo.
Yeah.
And now I'm in India, and as they say, if you're in Rome, you do what the Romans do. So is that what you've
Exactly.
had to do?
So, lifestyle was very different. I think Tokyo and Bombay are both bustling cities, but
Mm.
at the end of the day, they're as different as can be. And that's what I think represent these two different parts of my identities. Tokyo is neat and clean and orderly and like organized to a fault, right? And Bombay is just all warmth. It's messy, it's vibrant, it's energetic. There's so much passion in the air, and everything is chaotic, but that chaos is what really attracts me. So I find that both like my introverted side is really influenced by Tokyo. I really like to stay in my own corner. I like to mind my own business at times. But then when I go to Bombay, I'm suddenly like this dancing, partying, laughing, screaming person. And that country just brings out that side of me. So I think they are very two different things, and I find that the place that I live in taps into different parts of my personality. So I am an ambivert by nature. So I become more of an introverted when I'm in Japan, just because of the surroundings, and then I become more of an extrovert when I'm in India. So I think adjusting to that, at first I was like, oh no, why is it so different? Why do I get so different when I'm in both countries? But now I was like, I've accepted it. I'm happy. In fact, every us human beings, we're also multifaceted. We have so many different parts of ourselves. I think it's
Yes.
important to know that all parts are equal, they're real, and they're okay. Like, we're not static. We're not going to be the
Mm.
same person every day. So I'm okay with it.
So you've learned to actually just like deal with it a day at a time, and incorporate the differences and try and find some base ground where you could, of course, live a lifestyle that suits you best.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Because the thing is, like, now, I mean, America is also a very big part of my identity, right?
Mm.
I studied there for like 4 years for undergrad, and I was actually born in America. So technically, I went back full
Wow.
circle. Yeah. So I was born in America, and then I did my undergrad there, and it was, again, it was a whole different experience because it's neither Tokyo, neither Bombay. But I think I'm a very adaptable person. The one thing that I've learned in the popping around countries is that I'm a very adaptable person, and it I am easily able to gauge what the other person needs, I'm a very empathetic person as well. So if I find that someone is comfortable in a certain way, I can feel myself adapting to that. It is something that I'm trying to make sure I don't do too much of, but I think that's what makes it very easy for me to go to any country. So yeah, that's definitely.
I think it's made you grow in many directions because you've learned so much about yourself by changing, should we say, a country. It hasn't changed your identity as such, but it's, I think, awakened your character to make you realize that there's certain potentials and strengths that you have that I don't think you would have realized had you just been in the same space all the time.
I agree. I agree. But these things also come with their pitfalls. I'll give you an example. I actually lost some friends along the way simply because of my different accents. I mean, you think it's ridiculous to think that, right? But I remember I was in college and I'd made a friend. And in college, I spoke like my original accent because it's in America. Of course, I'm going to talk like an American. And it's also what I've learned, right? Um, but the problem was, this one particular girl that I got really close to, and we became really close and everything. And when you change accents, your dialect changes. Certain words you use, certain words you don't use. While you may be the same person at heart, there are catchphrases that are very unique to each accent. And I think she one day observed me in a room full of just Indians, right? Where I spoke like in my Indian accent, where that's how I interacted with them. And maybe like the switching is something that I'm very comfortable with because it's like it's been a part of my life as long as I've known. It's I've this is kind of like what happens when you've grown up in different countries. But I think for her it became so jarring, and she's like, I don't know. I don't know which part of you is real, which part of you is fake, who the real you is. And sometimes I feel like, and it was actually a really, like, my first year of college to hear that someone thought that my accent determined what kind of person I was. And I'm like, I'm still the same person, regardless of which accent I talk in. I'm still me. I'm still the person, all feelings, limbs, and everything. I'm still me, right? And that person was like, no, I mean, I just rather not. And they thought I was like fake or, too different and too much to understand. And which is fine, you have those experiences. But I think that's what I remember crying and going back to my dorm room because this is the first friend that I made in college. And I didn't think my accent would be such a problem for someone. And I remember just crying and thinking, I should just choose. Like, I should just choose which is me and which is not. But how do you do that when both are really integral parts of you?
Yeah,
So,
it's
yeah.
something you've grown up with. And I mean, the accent
Yeah.
is just part of having to relocate from one place to the other, but it hasn't
Yeah.
changed the inner being. And I think the only time I think when you realize that person has walked away, then they're not worth the while.
I know
Because
100%.
the fact of the matter remains is if a person does not see your inner beauty and your inner being and the
Yeah.
true self that you are, irrespective of which accent you're using,
Yeah.
then obviously you can realize and gauge from that they're not seeing you for the true person that you are. And
Yeah. 100%.
I think that's when it's time to move on and ask yourself the question, is it really worth the while trying to salvage something like
Yeah.
that?
Because, at the end of the day, like, I mean, it took me a very, in that moment, I was very, like, heartbroken. And that was when I felt like the full weight of my crushing identity and, all of that. But it took me a while, but I was able to come to terms with the fact that I am not going to dilute my varied life, just to make it palatable for someone else. My dad didn't make all the sacrifices he made, you know, only for me today to worry about what people think of me simply because of the way the R's roll off of my tongue. And this is something that I told
Exactly.
myself
It's
every day.
something that they need to appreciate the type of person you are and the things that you bring to the table and the value that you have within yourself and what you've been, giving towards the relationships that you have to be able to create that value. So I think if people don't see the value in you, then really honestly speaking, then they're not the right people for you.
No, 100%. And to all the, to all the girls and boys and everyone that lives through, say, the diaspora or lives through certain, like, growing up in different countries, I guess that's what I want to say. Like, you are still you. There is a fundamental you. You are still the person, as kind, as loving, and everything. And
Exactly.
nothing, just because of the way you talk, that doesn't change that. And, so I think your focus, and I learned this very later on, but your focus shouldn't be to focus on how you sound, but to focus on what you're saying. And I think that's just the
and
most.
on who you are, and also
Yeah,
about I think with it comes one huge word, which is respect.
I
uh,
agree.
and the person must respect you for your values and your
Yeah,
ethics and the principles that you've been brought up with,
yeah,
and the whole being that you are, as opposed to just, as you were saying, the rolling of the r's and the o's off the tongue.
yeah.
So I think we really appreciate that you've taken the time out to explain that to us, and I'm hoping that people that are in your situation get to understand that looking at a person is looking at their value and what they can do for your relationship as a person, as human beings, to be able to move each other forward and look at the good in each other and learning from all those goods. And I always believe in one thing, some people have strengths and weaknesses, each one of us. And sometimes my weaknesses could be your strength, and we can help each other move forward that way. So I think having to just have that accent is just one of those things, depending on the type of country you come from. So it's something that we just need to respect as human beings.
I agree. I agree. And at the end of the day, it's just really all about it's all about being your authentic self, but also recognizing that your authentic self can mean
Exactly.
different things for different people. It's not one fixed template that I'm not the same person that I am to my parents. I'm not the same person I am to my boyfriend. I'm not the same person I am to my friends. And accepting that different parts of you come out when faced with different people, that's finding your true authentic self. I think that is definitely.
I so agree with you, Parini. What would you like to leave with our viewers this afternoon? What sort of message would you like them to know?
Um, I mean, it's such a weighted question considering I'm only like 23 years old. I wonder if I have anything valuable enough to say. But I would say this. This is really like, whatever it is that you're starting, wherever it is that you're going, whatever world you're entering, there's that inherent fear of being embarrassed. There's that inherent fear of, falling flat on your face and having people laugh at you. And I was really scared before I started my content creation journey as well. Like, either people are going to laugh at me for my accent, or maybe like I'm just doing something stupid or whatever, right? Um, Tell yourself that embarrassment is the entry fee to success. So anything that you do, it doesn't matter if you get embarrassed. Great if you get embarrassed. Great if people are laughing at you, because you are paying your dues to eventually be successful. And if you want to ever be successful, you need to be embarrassed. So welcome it, embrace it, and you'll go places. I hope it turns out true for me. So yeah.
It already has. We can see that you're moving yourself into many different spaces there, and doing so well for yourself, keeping that positivity going, especially through this COVID-19 period. Having to go through this identity confusion, I think, has been a whole lot more challenging as such. But it's nice to see that you've created your environment and respected yourself and your inner being and the person you are, and having to understand that people need to accept and love you exactly for who you are. So I want to commend you on that, because you've stayed true to yourself. We'll put it that way,
Thank you.
which I think is very important in today's day and age. And it's for us not to lose our identity as human beings and the types of people we are and what sort of credibilities and values we can take into our communities and into society. So congratulations, you've been doing
Thank
well
you.
thus far. From myself and the team, we really want to thank you for joining us.
Of course.
It's
Thank
been
you
an
for having
absolute
me.
pleasure. What message would you like to just leave us with before you go?
I guess just, everyone has a story to tell. Focus on learning about that story. Don't judge them. Don't assume. Try to learn that story about them. Everyone has a story to tell.
That is so true. Thank you so much for joining me
Thank you.
all the way
Thank
this
you so much.
evening, should I say, from Tokyo.
Of
I wish
course.
you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you.
I think you have become a role model to the situation that other people are in,
Yeah.
which you have found yourself. And you've shown the resilience and the fact that you can overcome this and you can keep your
Yeah.
identity without having to change your values and your ethics. So
Yeah.
well done. Thank you so
Thank
much from myself and the
And
team.
to all the people watching, if you want to, talk to me more about this or anything, or I also love to read books on the diaspora, you're welcome to connect with me on the Parini Press on Instagram, and I will be doing a lot of stuff about talking about this. So definitely, if you ever feel like you want to talk about this, reach out.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for creating
Thank
a
you.
support structure for those out there that don't even know how to start to deal with it. So we want to commend you on that. That's, I think, a very selfless thing to do, reaching out to people and giving them an idea of how to overcome the situation. But you do take care of yourself. Lots
Thank
of
you.
love
Take
from all of
care.
us here
Love.
at the Salam Media team in South Africa. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye and stay safe.
Yes, you too.
That was Parini Shah giving us some really good, valuable information regarding your identity and how important it is when moving and relocating from one place to the other, how to be able to keep the identity and, of course, help yourself at the same time fit into that space that you're in, because obviously it's a very different lifestyle and a very different space. I think that was very valuable information. And, of course, go to her Instagram handle to, of course, get some support structure from her as far as that is concerned. We're going to go for a quick break. We'll be back with you in a bit.